Okay, pardon the mess, both behind the printer and the printer itself. I'll get into a few of those details as we go through here. But a few of you have asked, how do you take the BOSSdelta 300 apart for whatever reason? Maybe you want to adjust the output voltage on the power supply, or in my case, I wanted to replace a couple of fans. But how do you get this thing apart without breaking it and without disconnecting more than you need to? So through a little bit of trial and error by unscrewing a few of the things that I should not have, hopefully I can keep you out of some of that trouble. Before you get started though, make sure of course that you unplug both the network cable if you've got the wired version, and certainly the power supply cable as well. And then make sure if you've got the glass bed or any other bed surface on that you've removed that. Yeah, I know the spring clamps or the tension clamps that are on there are pretty good. I'm sure it actually wouldn't fall out, but there's no reason to risk it. So I'm going to do my best to show you how these things work. I've got a few of these items already removed. So before I pop them off, I'm going to try and show you up close a little bit more about how these work so that as you're taking them apart, it may make a little bit more sense to you. So the clips that you've got in here, and it's these clips right here that you're seeing, there's 3 per side. Again, these 3 have already been removed. They're made out of these right here. So let's see if we can make these a little bit more visible here. So there's one part here, and then there's a second part here that looks like a pin. So the way these work is the pin goes into, it's sort of like an anchor in a wall, right? Where the pin goes into the anchor, expands the anchor, and that's how it's held in place. So what we're going to do is we're trying to remove these out of here is we've got to get something up under the head of this pin right here, pop that out, at which point you'll be able to, if I can do this here with my fingers, remove the pin, maybe. Remove the pin, and then this will be left in there. This, we'll call it the anchor or the socket, or I don't know the right word for it. So this is still going to be holding the parts in place though. So you'll also need to remove these as you go around, not just the heads of the pins. So let me see if I can get in here and do that on one of these and see if you can see what's going on. So I'm going to take this one out of the center right here. What you'll also notice is they hang over the lips here a little bit. So rather than trying to come at it from the inside, if you come from the outside, it's going to be just a little easier. These are plastic, so be somewhat careful. You don't want to apply too much torque. But if you get in there and you sort of go around a little bit with a flat head, it doesn't even have to be super sharp. You should be able to get these to pop out. So there you go. Popped out, not too much trouble. Then you're going to need to go and do the exact same thing again with that, with the socket or whatever you want to refer to this as, the anchor, what have you. This one's a little bit trickier to get under. So instead of the flathead, I actually used a knife edge. I had ground a knife edge onto this sort of putty knife that makes it a lot thinner and easier to get in. That actually tends to do a little bit better. I'm trying not to flip this and make it fly across the room. Easier said than done. Yep, there we go. All right, just got it started with the putty knife. All right, and so then that piece came out. You're going to want to do the same thing again for each of these. We'll fast forward as I take the rest of those apart. But be careful as you're pulling this down, and I'll show you why in just a second. All right, got them all undone. As you can see, I'm still holding this together. I suggest bringing a little plastic tray along to put all of these items in. Also, something I failed to say, you're not going to see this exact same configuration on the bottom of yours the first time you take it off, mainly this big hole here. You're also not going to see these brown plugs as well. You're going to see something that is a very similar sort of pin and socket, pin and anchor connection type holding in the stock fan. As I said, I took this apart the first time in order to put new fans in. So I've got different fans. They're Noctua fans, which is why they look like this. And I'll talk a little bit why I had to cut a hole in the bottom of this. Eventually, what's going to go in there is fan guard. So I'll eventually cover that back up. So once you get all of these undone and you've put them aside where you're not going to lose them, right? It's still held in place barely by the 3 plastic coverings that are at each of these corners. The other thing you may have noticed as well is this is a little wobbly, so leaving it here precariously balanced on the rear axis, I guess that's the Y axis, you're going to want to be careful. It will easily tip over. So again, I would try and keep your hand on here as much as possible. Before you pop the metal base plate out, though, from these plastic pieces that are retaining it, you need to be careful of 2 things. This bottom section is connected by 2 wires. One of them is the fan wire here that is cooling the control board, and that's connected to the control board itself. So you don't just want to yank this out of here. You're going to yank that fan connection out, which is problematic for 2 reasons. First of all, you're not going to know where to plug it back into without having to look up schematics or guess and check. Or second of all, you might actually break the connector or break the wire, and that may not be your intention, especially if you're not looking to replace the fan. Second of all, and yours is going to potentially be in a different spot. It just happens to be the way that I drilled the holes here and put it back on. But you're going to have down here in the bottom section a screw that's going to be holding on the ground wire as well. So both of those are going to be connections to other parts internal in here. So you don't just want to yank this thing off when you get it undone. So nevertheless, though, you're eventually going to need to get your fingers under here, and you're going to need to pop these guys out. And I've already popped a few of them out. So then you get this that will open up. So again, it's pretty tight in here. So I don't know how easily you're going to be able to see it. But you can see, like I said, there are going to be 2 wires. The fan wire here that's going to be red and black. Even on the stock fan, it's going to be red and black. And then you're going to see the the ground wire connection that runs through here and out to the power supply. So you're going to need to undo both of these. So you're going to need to get rid of the fan, which again has the same connectors, just a smaller version of them as you saw here. So same process to remove them. You're going to see 4 of them here. So the other thing you can do if you're not going to replace the fan, though, is you can leave it connected. In my case, I've already replaced the fan, and then simply remove the connector from the board. I'm just trying not to bend and break it. All right. Fan is undone. And then unscrew the ground plug. And for this, you may need a pair of pliers to hold, or a wrench to hold the nut on one side while you use an Allen key or other appropriate bit to get the back of that done. And of course, my pliers are somewhere else. All right, now with the proper wrench and bit, this is where you wish you had a third hand to hold all of this together, but it's not the end of the world. You can eventually get it. Again, try not to lose that nut. All right, and we are now disconnected. So the fan is gone and the ground wire is gone. Set that off to the side. And just so you can see what it looks like, it's a lock nut, a nylon lock nut. It happens to be a 7/16. And then the other side has what looks to be a weird washer. Let's see if we can make it so you can see this. And these are made, so what you'll notice is it's sort of got a bunch of teeth on it. It's made so that it will dig into and through the powder coating on that base plate so that it can get into the bare metal so that, it actually acts as a ground and is grounding the frame. So this is going to go into our little miniature parts bin as well. If you are removing the fan and you want to see what those look like, again, they're the same concept. So the clips holding the fan, they've got that little head, right? The little pin head here. And then it's got the same, but it's a longer version sort of the anchor of the socket. The other piece that it has, though, is it's got these little, and I'm going to show that to you. a little retaining washer as well. So those are easy to lose as you're taking it off. So try and keep those in your sight as well. But again, that tiny little rubber washer that goes around those pins. Again, disassembly is the same as it is for the larger pins as well though. So now that you've got that, depending on what it is you're trying to do in here, you may want to take the next step that I took, which was, since I was removing the power supply, I came in here and I actually numbered every one of these connections. So as I unscrewed them and removed them, I was numbering them 1 through 5. There are 5 different areas where the items are connected. 1 for the positive voltage out, 1 for the positive or negative voltage out. Then you've got the ground, the neutral, and the load coming in from your wall plug. So again, you do you. If you don't want to number them and you can keep them all intact, that's great. The other thing I did was I also took a picture of it so that I could see what all of this looked like, so that when I put it back, at least it had some sort of similar looking assembly as I put it back together. All right, so if you are going to take the step of removing the power supply, either to replace the power supply or the fan or what have you, it's fairly simple. There are 4 screws on 2 on each side, up sort of near the corners. The only one that's difficult to get to is the one that's down here, sort of behind the board, the controller board. But if you've got a non sort of bit holder screwdriver, if you've got a normal Phillips screwdriver, you should be able to get those out without too much trouble. So that's it. That's the disassembly. I didn't go any farther than that. I mean, I moved some wires around a little bit here and there, but I didn't have to disconnect anything else other than the fan, the ground wire, and then the power supply connections so that I could get the power supply out. Now, you'll notice that this fan is sitting on the outside of the power supply, because when I replaced it with a Noctua fan. So Noctua doesn't make these really, really thin fans like you see here. It's a 15 centimeter fan, and this is the Noctuas are 25 millimeter fans. So they're not going to be a direct replacement, and there wasn't enough room in the power supply to shove this larger depth or thickness fan in there. So I had to mount it on the outside. It's also why I had to cut a hole in the base plate, because it was, if you can see, the base plate here is going to fit and it's really tight. And I didn't think that the fan was going to have very much room to move air since it was going to be bumped right against that base plate. So I cut the hole in a fairly similar position to where the fan is, which should allow it enough breathing room, so to speak. So the power supply fan for me, at the temperatures, both bed and hot end that I print at, they do kick on, and it was a little noisy. It's not egregious, but it's a little noisy. If I had this to do over again, though, I would not bother replacing the fan that cools the board. The reason I say that is, honestly, this fan, maybe I got a good one, because I do know that these are not the most expensive, these GDT fans, but I must have gotten a good one. It's quiet. In fact, I actually don't notice a significant difference in when the power supply is not working hard and that fan's not on. And as long as the hot end fan and the cooling fans are not on, I actually don't notice a big difference between the more expensive Noctua fan and this one. The other reason not to replace it unless you just want to or it goes bad is that Noctua fan is just a little thicker, and it makes all of this connection in here really, really tight. So I would worry about it pressing against this, depending on exactly how everything is set up in here. So again, it's not very loud. I just keep the stock board cooling fan. If you want to, you can replace the power supply fan with anything that's going to be, I believe, a 60 millimeter that's quiet. At this point, I don't even hear it at all coming on, even when I have long prints at reasonably high bed and hot end temperatures, where in the past I could hear it kicking on from time to time. Nevertheless, those little 25 millimeter fans that cool the hot end, and then those smaller blower fans are going to be much louder than the power supply is anyway. So, it may be a moot point depending on what your printing styles are. That's it. If you've got any questions, give me a yell. I'll try and help out. I am by no means an expert. I did this through some trial and error. I removed some screws from the top, which are very unfortunately not held in, but have aluminum spacers in them, or preventing this from being tightened, this aluminum heat spreader here at the bottom from being tightened too tight to the top. And I certainly don't have big hands by any means, but it is a bear to try and get those back in there without removing a bunch of things. I eventually did it, and I'm lucky that I've got reasonably small hands. I just don't have any dexterity in them. So do not remove any of the screws on the top like I did. You'll be much happier. All right, I think that's it. I'll button this back up, reverse order, connect the ground wire, connect the fan. Fan, at least for me, is connected here. It's a little white connector that are under the 2 fuses and next to some of the other fan connectors here. All right, should be reasonably painless. Like I said, give me a yell if you got any questions. Thanks. There you go. Nothing blew up. No fan blades catching on any wires.